The basic divisions of the human brain begin early in development. So we're looking here just a couple of weeks post-conception, and here just slightly afterwards. So this is difference in time of maybe a week or two at most. And you'll notice the nervous system is now, central nervous system is a tube. And early in development, the tube has 3 divisions. But 2 of these, the most rostral and the most caudal, subdivides. And so here, slightly later, 3rd or 4th week of gestation in a human, what you've got is 5 divisions. And the divisions from rostral to caudal, from front to back, are the telencephalon, it's this region here, the diencephalon, which is just in back of it, the mesencephalon, this region, and then the medencephalon and the myelencephalon. So I think I've just misdrawn those. Medencephalon's here, myelencephalon's there. Spinal cord's here. All right. Those have adult components. These things will live on for as long as the organism does. And so if we look at telencephalon, encephalon means in the head. All right. Telencephalon, cerebral cortex, and all of the cerebral cortex. And underneath, so that's one thing, cerebral cortex. And then underneath it, some of the largest, in fact, the largest nuclei in the brain. These telencephalic subcortical nuclei are the basal ganglia. Now the term ganglia, ganglion, is typically reserved these days for collections of neurons that are outside the CNS, for collections of neurons that are in the peripheral nervous system. But the basal ganglia were so named before that convention was adopted. And these are very, very large groups of neurons in the CNS, clearly nuclei, and just misnamed. So the basal ganglia we'll talk about much later in the class. And some other subcortical nuclei, for example, one called the amygdala, because it is almond-shaped, and amygdala means almond. So large subcortical nuclei that are telencephalic. Diencephalon includes 3 regions that are interesting, each of them in its own right. Diencephalon, the thalamus, the gateway to all discriminative information that makes it to cerebral cortex. The hypothalamus, which means underneath the thalamus, which is exactly where you find it. Hypothalamus, biggest bang for the buck in the brain, some 60 grams of tissue that controls so very much of your behavior, at least the appetitive behaviors and autonomic behaviors. And finally, the retina. The retina is an outgrowth. Retina, there's an eye in there somewhere. The retina is this thing right here. The retina is an outgrowth of the diencephalon. So it is, the retina is CNS. Midbrain remains midbrain. Myelencephalon and medencephalon have their own adult names attached to them. The medencephalon includes the pons and the cerebellum. So cerebellum's huge. It's this thing right here. Cerebellum and pons both are derived from medencephalon, this early embryonic structure. And the myelencephalon forms the medulla. Okay, so those are the basic subdivisions of the human brain. They're established early in development, and they continue on into adulthood. We're going to lump the midbrain, pons, and medulla to one grand scheme. We're going to call them the brainstem. We're going to call then the diencephalon and the telencephalon together. We're going to call them the forebrain. All right, so you should bear in mind when you hear these terms, that is what we're talking about. Brainstem, all this stuff back here, and then forebrain, diencephalon and telencephalon.